Hi, good evening. I would hope to leave enough time for the question because I'm basically more interested in hearing your question and answering them, just talking to myself here in this room. So what I would like to do, and I'll explain first of all who am I, because it's very important when you listen to a lecture or when you read an article, is to understand who is writing the article, who's giving the lecture. First of all, I'm not an historian, although I grew up in a very academic house. My mother is an historian and archivist. So as a guide, I'm trying to do two things. I'm trying to make people interact with the place, in our case, the Chamber of Holocaust, or with the objects and the artifacts we see, and I make people interact and try to understand not just what they see, also to see the story behind the artifacts, and stories that may not directly connect to those artifacts, but I, as a guide, can open a window to new stories, new horizons through those artifacts. But basically, I'm trying to make a show out of with every group, trying to make into a new experience for the group and for myself, but also because I have some, I like history and I grew up in a very academic community. I'm trying also to bring some information, some documents from the archive, and trying to bring a little bit of professional history into the experience. That's what I do usually with my groups, and also in the Chamber of Holocaust. So every time we go into the Chamber of Holocaust, I'm trying to take the group into different artifacts. We have like 5,000 headstones in the Chamber of Holocaust of thousands of communities. But no matter what, no matter the time I have with the group, there's one thing I'll always have to bring to the group, because this is a thing that I relate. Before we explain about the Chamber of Holocaust and where it is exactly and what it's about, where it came from, I want to bring one artifact from the Chamber of Holocaust, which I relate personally. We can see it here, to the memory of the victims on their way from Vienna to La'aretz. The people who came from Vienna to the country, the murderers got them, and they were perished on the 12th and 13th of October 1941, next to Tsaziva, next to Shabat's Yugoslavia, Serbia. Now, this is a very interesting story, first of all, because the Chamber of Holocaust is mainly a place where people from the Landschaft, people who came from different communities in Europe, but all over the Jewish world, who were victimized by the Germans during the Holocaust, could come and put some memory of their community in the Chamber of Holocaust. You can write on the tombstone the name of the community, the name of the people who organized the memory there, the date. We usually use the term of Asara B'Tevet, 10th of Tevet, as a day to say Kaddish for all the people we don't know when they're perished. We don't know when they died. So we say Kaddish on the 10th of the day, because usually we say the Kaddish on the day, on the Yortzeit of the person who died. But if you don't know that, the Rabbanut Rishit says you can say it on Asara B'Tevet. But some communities know the date of the Aktzia, the day that the Germans came to that village, that community, and basically killed all the people there. And those communities sometimes says, we have our own Memorial Day, our own private Holocaust Day on Bet Iyar, Gimel Shvat. The Chamber of Holocaust is full of dates that they can relate to that. We'll come to that in a minute. And usually it's a community, means people who lived in the same village or town or city for centuries, even more than that, in Europe. And that's a community. And the people who survived, or the people who left before the Holocaust, are still in some way connected and feel themselves as people who came from that community, a Landschaft, people who came from that community. And those people who are the people who came to the Chamber of Holocaust and put all those memorial signs in the Chamber of Holocaust. But this is not a community. This is not the community of Vienna, which my mother came from, my grandparents came. My mother was born in America, but all her siblings were born in Vienna. Her parents lived in Vienna between the wars. This plaque is not for the communities of Vienna. It's for a certain group of 1,500 people who on November 39, at the beginning of the war, took a boat, not just from Vienna, also people from Czechoslovakia and other places in Central Europe, but mainly in main Germany, and in those days it was all Germany, and they took a boat and they sailed along the river, and they were hoping to get to the sea, to the Mediterranean, and from then to the country, and they managed to get through Hungary to Yugoslavia, was beyond the German border, but from some reason, winter, the river froze. The British, who are against people coming illegally to the country, managed to apparently, or probably, managed to persuade the Bulgarian authorities not to let that group pass, and that group spent a year and a half in Yugoslavia, starting their own new community of refugees. And when the Nazis came, they weren't local Jews there, so they were among the first Jews that were massacred in Serbia. Not all of them were killed. 250 teenagers received, before the German came, received legal certificates, legal permission to come to Israel, to Palestine in those days. 200 of them actually managed to get on a boat on time to get here, and they survived. And about 5 or 6 people managed to escape the Nazis when the Nazis came. And the reason I'm telling this story is two things. One, the idea that new communities can evolve even during the Holocaust. And now this community, people who survived that experience, relate to that experience of a year and a half there as a new community. So it's also changing the concept of what is a community. And the main reason why I really relate to that story is because of this picture. My mother, Hadassah, was born in 1944 when her parents met again. They ran from Austria in 2 different directions. My grandfather actually went to Switzerland after the Kristallnacht in 1938, when it was too dangerous in Vienna. And my 2 uncles, I had 2 uncles and 2 aunts, my 2 uncles also went on their own from Czechoslovakia, from Central Europe, to America, and they joined the army. This is a picture of them during World War II in the front line. They didn't serve together, but they at some point they managed to meet, or one of them had a vacation or something, and he dropped by. This is Willie, the younger brother, who went to see Herman and to visit him in his unit, and my grandmother with two my aunts who were then little children, she left Vienna on September 1941. In a few weeks before those people in Yugoslavia were massacred, she left Vienna with a passport because my family was already in America, most of the family, and she had papers to get to America, which wasn't easy. She also spent 3 years under Nazi rule in Austria, which was after united into Germany, after Austria was united Austria was united with Germany. It was Germany then, and 3 years she lived there, waiting for those permissions, waiting for the visa, for the affidavit to get to America. And at the same time, that group of people was also trying to get out. And what I take from that story is that the difference between my family that managed to get to America and my 2 uncles came back to Germany as soldiers who fought against the Nazis, and the difference between them and the people from that group, most of them were killed, is sometimes just luck or hashgacha, or the Kadosh Baruch Hu is deciding that it's not determined but what we do. And I think that's a very important lesson about the Holocaust. It's not just about what you do, it's also about not controlling what's happening. And I think it's a very important part of what at the end I'll say, part of what I think that the role of the Chamber of Holocaust is. And I think the main, when Tamar asked me to give this lecture, one of the main questions is, I think 2 main questions. One, what will be the memory of the Holocaust in years to come, when we won't have any more Holocaust survivors to tell us a story, when we'll have to reinvent those stories? And the other main question is about the Chamber of Holocaust, which is the first Holocaust memorial site. There were a few monuments built before even the state of Israel was established. People in some kibbutzim who heard what happened and trying to build some kind of monuments in Mishmar HaEmek, I think, and I think there are more of that. Mishmar HaEmek for sure. But the Chamber of Holocaust is the first complex with rooms, with an idea, with a concept. Not a museum. This is not a museum. This is a place for people to gather together, different communities, to mourn for their loved one, for the communities, for their Landschaft. But it's not a museum, but it is an organized place. And it brings a different angle to the Holocaust memory. Now, the fact that this is probably the first memorial site established in 1949 is not reason enough to maintain this place today. I mean, we could, I don't know, shut this place down, God forbid, or transfer all the objects there into a different museum, like we do in other archaeological sites, that we take objects from archaeological sites and bring them into the museum because it's easier to observe them there. I think we need a better answer for what is the purpose of the Holocaust, of the Chamber of Holocaust, and what will be the role in future when we'll need a new way to remember the Holocaust. And I think this man, the person who established the Chamber of Holocaust and Mount Zion, his name was Shmuel Zanvil Kahana. His father was Shlomo David Kahana, one of the main rabbis and the chief Av Beit Din, the chief Jewish judge of the Warsaw community, who wasn't the main rabbi of Warsaw because they didn't have a main rabbi in the 30s, but he was one of the most important rabbis in Warsaw, his father, not Shmuel Zanvil. And in 1940, when the Nazis came to look for the main rabbis in Warsaw, in 1939 already, he fled. He was actually, the community asked him and a few other rabbis, they told him, the Nazis are going to look for you specifically. There's nothing you can do here now. You have to leave. There's no point of you for staying here. And Rabbi Kahana says, I will only leave Warsaw if I'll get the role of being the rabbi of the Jewish quarter. So Shmuel Zanvil Kahana now became the son of the rabbi of the Jewish quarter, and he's very connected to the Jewish quarter. And Shmuel Zanvil Kahana is a very unique mixture of a politician, an entrepreneur, a writer, a scholar, a dreamer. Basically, he was a civil servant for most of his professional life. Even before the war, he was working for the Jewish Agency, which is the pre-government we had. So he was part of a civil servant then. And he was always trying to initiate new ideas. One of them was the idea of Hakel, which we'll get to that in a minute. In 1946, the idea of gathering all the Jews every Sukkot after Shemitah, a very old tradition from the First Temple period mainly. We'll get to that. And he was trying to bring a new concept of how to remember the Holocaust. One of them was through legend. The idea that history and facts can't give us all the picture, can't give us the real notion of what is the Holocaust. As Immanuel Levinas once said when he unraveled what people thought was a real letter, but it was actually what people thought was a real letter from Ghetto Varsha, written by the Yosef Rakover, and Levinas was one of the people who revealed that it was actually a literate, it was actually a story. It was a creation, a fiction creation, meant us to believe, or not even meant to believe, that it was a real letter. And that's a different story not for this lecture, but Immanuel Levinas then said that fake letter is so real that only fiction, as real as fiction can be. Meaning that when we're trying to understand the Holocaust, trying to get to the facts won't give us the truth. Not always will give us the truth. Sometimes we need fiction to get to the bottom of things, to really get the truth. And I think the ideas of Shmuel Zanvil Kahana, who actually established Mount Zion, not just the Holocaust chamber, and I think it's connected to the fact that his father before that was the chief rabbi of the Jewish quarter. And here we are right outside the Chamber of Holocaust. We are standing, if we were there, we'd be standing with the Chamber of Holocaust to our backs, and we're looking at what is known, I'm emphasizing, what is known as King David's tomb. I'm not saying more than that, but legends are fine. I think legends are important, so we'll keep to calling this place the tomb of King David. And he was trying to organize the tomb of King David with the roof on top of it and the Chamber of Holocaust into a supplement Jewish quarter. He called it a hallway into the Jewish quarter. He says, we are waiting for the Jewish quarter. We're waiting for the Temple Mount. We are building after 1948. This is a map from 1949. As far as I know, it came from, I got it from the State Archive. It's a file made by the Ministry of Tourism in 1941, trying to establish what was left from us. This is the only part of the old city left in our hands after 1948, known to us today as Mount Zion. It's somewhat part of the old city because there are archaeological sites from the Iron Age and Second Temple period, and it is basically part of the old city, but it's not inside the old city walls. And this part was left in our hands, and Shazak is trying, after the war, to organize somewhat of a holy site, a pilgrimage site, not just for the Holocaust, for the holidays, and he organized a calendar of sad days and happy days. One of the most festivous days was Shavuot, tomb of King David. Shavuot is the birthday and the Yortzeit of King David. He lived exactly, according to the legend, exactly 70 years, and he's trying to build this place into this site. But this site is just a place for us to remember that the real Jewish quarter and the Temple Mount is what we're looking for. In this picture, the Mount Olive, this is what you see when you climb the King David tomb. And people for 19 years were climbing on that roof to watch over the Mount Olive Cemetery and into the old city. We can see here the golden dome and the place of the Temple Mount. And people were coming here. People could see the president room. Shazak had the idea. He gave this room as a present to President Weizmann for his 75th birthday in 1941. We're not sure if President Weizmann ever visited that room, but President Ben-Zvi actually used that room for Pesach and Sukkot to make it into the audience room to people to visit him during the high holidays. And here we can see a special memorial site for the soldiers who died in 1948 inside, we'll see it again in the picture in a minute, inside the city walls, inside the Jewish quarter, and were not properly buried until 1968. So between 1948 and 1967, the families of the people who, the soldiers who died inside the city walls could only come here as a memorial site. And all this together is Mount Zion, the Chamber of Holocaust, the President Room, the Tomb of King David, the holidays, Tisha B'Av, Asara B'Tevet, the 10th of Tevet, all this together is a mixture of a pilgrimage site, a holy site that was there only to wait until we get back to the old city. And one of those things that I said before, that in 1946 is organizing the first Hakel. I don't know if people know about this, but today we do it until today. Every Sukkot after Shemitah, which actually the next Sukkot, this coming Sukkot in 8 months from now, we're going to celebrate the Hakel. That during the First Temple period was the time that once in 7 years, the king was supposed to read from the scrolls, read from the Torah in front of the entire nation, or all the people who were supposed to come on Sukkot to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem. And it was somewhat of an experience of Har Sinai, somewhat of experience of Netinat Torah. People were reconnecting, re-signing the special relationship between the nation and God, which in relation to the Holocaust brings a lot of questions, I think. And he was trying to organize all kinds of events like this. He was trying to say, he organized the first Hakel in 46 inside the city walls. His father was the chief rabbi of the Jewish quarter. And in 1953, and I looked through the files in the State Archive, he started working on it long before his death, like a year before. And you can see that this is the advertisement for the people coming to Mount Zion. And a few months before that, he's already corresponding with the National Train Authority, with the Transport Authority and the train company to organize special trains. That train station, if people remember, the old train station in Jerusalem is actually very near to Mount Zion. So if people have special trains, he was asking for at least 2 trains to bring people on special occasions beyond the regular trains coming from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, in order to bring the people, and he's corresponding with them, and they're telling him several times, because he's keep pushing them, says he's not agreeing with their answer. He says, we don't have enough trains, like it's 1952. It's a very poor country, we can't help you, but they are still trying to help you, which was very interesting. Is part of the, this is just an example of how without any budget he was trying to get help from all kinds of government organizations. And he was also trying to bring a program. He wrote a program, which was very interesting, because he wrote a program stating 4 different blocks or different areas in Mount Zion. The 2 main ones is the tomb of King David with the President Room, and the other one is for the Chamber of Holocaust and the around the Chamber of Holocaust, a place to remember not just the people from the Holocaust, also to remember different holy sites in Jerusalem. Shazach was very into reacquainting people or reinventing holy sites all over Israel. Most of the famous, or some of the famous tombs all around the country are actually discovered or invented by Shazach. And he was writing a program on what should be on the Mount Zion, what is the purpose of Mount Zion. And you can see here it says, Har Tzion eino tachlif hakotel. Har Tzion is not a replacement to the Western Wall. It's just a pathway to the main way. It's just for this time to ask for wait until we can get to Mount Zion, to Temple Mount again. And a few friends of mine who work in Mount Zion still believe that Mount Zion today should be the entrance, the lobby to the old city. Maybe we should, that's a dream of some friends of mine. And also he's explaining about the Chamber of Holocaust, which hold a sacred duty for us, the first generation for Geula, the first generation for the state of Israel, our duty to remember all those people, not just the people who died in the Holocaust, all the people. And that's the connection, all the people who suffered for the past 2,500 years. And that's the main connection, I think, to the Asara B'Tevet, the 10th of Tevet. The 10th of Tevet is the day we mark the decline, the fall of the house of David, our ancient kings from the First Temple period. And that disaster, the day that the siege, the Babylonian siege, began in Jerusalem, is part of the long change of disasters and Holocaust throughout the years. And that's the idea of not just, the Chamber of Holocaust is not just about what happened between 1939 and 1945, or between 1922 when the Nazis are starting to work in Europe, or you can pick the date, or 1933 when they come to power. It's more complex than that. And when we get to that, we'll see some evidence that the story of the Chamber of Holocaust is different, because other memorial sites for the Holocaust are trying to ask, what are Nazis? Can we relate? Can we make a connection between something that happened to some Jews in the diaspora to the Nazis? For instance, whether or not the Iraqi Farhud, the pogrom against the Iraqi Jews in 1941, is it or is it not connected to the Holocaust? It's a very, I think it's a big debate. Some historians say it's not related and there's nothing to discuss. And he's saying here in this document, and Har Tzion, we gathered all the holiness, all the holy objects, tefillin and scrolls that were destroyed by the Nazis. People brought with them lampshade made from scrolls, heels made from scrolls, tefillin and Torah that was just torn down or even filled with blood by the Nazis who killed Jews trying to protect those Torah scrolls, and they gathered all those things into the Chamber of Holocaust. That was the beginning of the Chamber of Holocaust, and he was trying to bring some sort of a calendar of Holocaust memorial days, several of those. We'll get to that. Before we go right through into the Chamber of Holocaust, one last thing. In 1958, he managed, this is a picture, when on the 10th anniversary, Yom Ha'atzmaut, on the 10th Independence Day, he managed to organize that the celebrations of our 10th Independence Day will start on Mount Zion, and he organized a very religious experience. You see those people waiting with the shofarot, waiting for the people to climb into some sort of a Temple Mount experience. So that's Shmuel Zalvin Kahana and how he's tried to build Har Zion into a pilgrimage site between Holocaust and Festivus Day and holidays and the Day of Independence. All that collapsed in 1967 when we came back to the old city. People just abandoned Har Zion, and Shazach left his office. He was, between 1949 and 1971, the general director of the Ministry of Religion, so he had the power to organize all those things, but after he left office in 1971, everything collapsed. The Chamber of Holocaust even is abandoned. Mainly the people just could come inside and take whatever they want for several years until the diaspora yeshiva took over and trying to maintain the place and does it until today. And going into the Chamber of Holocaust, this is the yard behind the Chamber of Holocaust, and you can see that the Chamber of Holocaust is down here, and the diaspora yeshiva is up there. And part of the idea of the yeshiva is that they learn Torah right above the Chamber of Holocaust. The Nazis trying to stop that. I'm talking about the story of the yeshiva there. Part of why they relate to the Chamber of Holocaust is that the Chamber of Holocaust tells the story of how the Nazis tried to destroy our nation, and the yeshiva is part of the victory over the Nazis. And the entrance to the Chamber of Holocaust, you can see it's at the basement of a very old building on Mount Zion. It wasn't built for the yeshiva or for the Chamber of Holocaust. All those buildings were found there or given to Shmuel Zalvin Kahana as abandoned property, and he used that. And the entrance to the Har Zion, it established, Chamber of Holocaust established in 1949, sorry. And on Mount Zion, there will be sanctuary for survivors, and it will be holy. So it means this is from from Obadiah. That's Mount Zion is the place. Of course, the prophet doesn't speak of Mount Zion as what we call today, but Mount Zion, but that's close enough. When we enter the Chamber of Holocaust, the Chamber of Holocaust started with two main things. One is to bring scrolls that, according to halacha, need to be buried, and the Chamber of Holocaust is considered to be a proper place for them, even though they're supposed to be buried. The Chamber of Holocaust is halachically kosher for those things to stay there, so people could see what happened there, and also it will be halachically proper to put them there. And you can see that those Torah scrolls are put in something that looks like a tomb, but it's open from above. It's covered with glass, so people can look into what the Nazis did there. And on the other side, on the left side, when you enter the Chamber of Holocaust, you see a scroll, what was left from the scroll from Vengerov. And there's a very sad story about the rabbi of Vengerov, that the Nazis forced him to clean the street and then fill his shtreimel with dirt and other disgusting things, wear it down, and they hit him over and over again. And the rabbi of Vengerov, according to the legend, according to the story, says to the community watching him, don't be worried for me. The only pain I feel is the pain about you, not about us, and not about myself. And according to some people, say that he died holding this Torah scroll, and so that's the reason why it's kept there next to the matzeva of the tombstone of the family, the community of Vengerov, and that's part of the story, that people bring object and also putting sign for their community. This object is also very special to me because it tells a very unique story. What it says here is Sefer HaZahav Lechevra Bikur Cholim Ushpitzin, meaning the golden book for the society of visiting the sick Ushpitzin. Now, talking about communities, talking about a site that trying to bring the memories of a community in the diaspora before the Holocaust, in all kinds of communities, Jewish communities. The communities were organized around, some communities were organized around societies. There's a society to bring food for the needy. There's a society to help mothers. There's a society to visit the sick. And each society has the book, and they write who's helping to maintain that part of the community. And the book is somewhat, some way to inspire people, to give them an incentive to participate, do something for the community. And this book, which almost nothing left from it, it's only the cover of the book left, not the book itself, but tell the story of how a society is trying to bring into a compassionate society, into a moral society. And this place is Ushpitzin. Usually I ask the group, where is Ushpitzin? Ushpitzin is the Yiddish name for a village known in Polish as Uświęcim and in German as Auschwitz. So the Chamber of Holocaust was built because of the atrocities of the Germans in Auschwitz, but we put there in the Chamber of Holocaust the other end of human morality, of human compassion and human companionship. And next we see a letter of a person who came from Uświęcim. This letter is written by a guy named Reuven Bennett. I know nothing about him, but I just read the letter. And he's telling a story that he lived in Uświęcim, Poland, before the war. Probably when he was born, if he was born before World War I, it was Auschwitz, it was Germany before World War I. And between the wars, it became Poland. And now it was on the border of Poland and Germany. Now it's basically the center of Poland. And he fled to the Soviet Union, and when he came back, he collected some items, including heels and other items, holy items, and he brought them to the Chamber of Holocaust. I don't know if he brought that as well, but maybe those stories are connected. So the Chamber of Holocaust is for, first of all, people bringing all kinds of objects, all kinds of gniza into the Chamber of Holocaust. And the other thing is those 30 jars, also coming from Austria. And those jars are a very unique story. They came in June 1949, which is very important. June 1949, it was organized by the community, the people who were left in the community of Vienna after the war. They gathered 30 jars of ashes from dozens of camps in Vienna. And those jars represent 200,000 Austrian Jews who were killed by the Nazis. My great-grandmother was one of them, who were killed in Theresienstadt. And those ashes represent them, and they brought them into a symbolic burial in Yerushalayim. What's interesting is that probably the government was a bit resentful because they were organizing to bring someone else from Vienna to be buried here, Herzl, and they actually brought those jars before Herzl came here. And that symbols something that some people maybe resent in 1941, that bringing the ashes of the Holocaust victims before we're bringing Herzl here, meaning bringing the past, the dying nation, before bringing Herzl, who represent the future of the state. And Shimon Wiesenthal, who was one of the people who, nobody knew him then, who was one of the people who organized this burial of the jars, he wrote a letter saying, we're not asking for approval. We're going to do it. We're going to do that. We're going to bring those, and we are hopeful that you're going to respect us. But we're going to do it anyway. We're not looking for approval. We're not looking for advice. And at first, it was buried in Sanhedria in June 1946. It was buried 1949. Sorry, it was buried in Sanhedria. Obviously, 1949 after the war, after the state of independence was established. But on Asara B'Tevet, 1941, Asara B'Tevet Tafshin Yud, 10th of Tevet, 1949, it was brought. The box of all the jars were brought into Mount Zion, and it's from Vaikra, meaning that you put the dish and the ashes of the sacrifice, and you put it at the altar. So this, the sacrifice in the book of Vaikra is an animal, but it would be sacrificed in the temple. But here, the ashes is the modern sacrifice. And we put it as close as we can to the Temple Mount, because Mount Zion is just the nearest point to the Temple Mount. It's not unique by itself. It's just the nearest point to the Temple Mount. I believe that if we were holding the Jewish quarter in the 48 war, and if we had the Jewish quarter in our hand after the war, the Chamber of Holocaust would have been established inside the Jewish quarter. After that, after the Chamber of Holocaust was established with those artifacts, and Shazach was asking people to bring those artifacts, tefillin and Torah scrolls and shofarot and sidurim, all kinds of artifacts. And after they brought the ashes from Austria, towards the end of 1950, they had a new idea. Allow communities, all those landschafts, all those communities, to put signs to memorize those communities. And this is one, the person here, his name is Eliyahu Levanon. We'll get the story, we'll explain the story in a second. He was working for the Ministry of Religion. He was working under Shmuel Zalvin Kahana, and his job was to approve all those signs. They all have to be 40 by 40 centimeters, 40 square centimeters. It's a very, all those, they all get the same reply. He just changed the dates and the name of the community. And it says here, please, please give us some, the background of your communities and your commitment to come here every year on your own Memorial Day. So we have the 10th of Tevet, Yom HaKadosh HaKlali. We have Kaf Zayin Nisan, the state Holocaust Day. But each community that bring their sign bring their matzeva into the Chamber of Holocaust have to establish their own day, their own unique day, and they're committed. If they want to put their sign in the Chamber of Holocaust, they are committed to come every year to make a memorial site. It's not just a place, this is not a museum. It's not about putting your sign and the story of your community in the Chamber of Holocaust. It's about a commitment, coming here every year, reading from Psalms, say Kaddish, learn some Mishnayot, and remember that community. That's the idea. The people who taught me about the Chamber of Holocaust told me the Chamber of Holocaust is not a museum. It's the place itself. It's the actual place. It's not the museum that tells a story of what happened in the Holocaust, like Yad Vashem or the ghetto fighters in the north. It's not the story of what happened in the Holocaust. It's the story of the people who gathered here in Israel and how they were trying to remember the Holocaust. And that story is not just about the Holocaust. The 10th of Tevet is about all the bad things that happened to us in the past 25 years. And Eliyahu Levanon is definitely an example for that. He came from Jerusalem. He was not just the head of what's known as the Mount Zion Committee organizing what happens in Mount Zion, Chamber of Holocaust, and the Tomb of King David. He was also very connected to the story of how to remember the soldiers who died in 48, and he wrote books, and he participated in very open debates and hurtful debates about what is the proper way to remember the soldiers who died in 48, between a more socialist, secular way and a more traditional religious way. And I'm not saying who is right, I'm not at all, but he was trying to represent. He tried to say that there is a important religious way to remember the people who died, and the story of Eliyahu Levanon, that he lost 2 sons in 48. One was buried in Har Herzl, but the other one, for 19 years, he wasn't buried. You can see his name here, Yaakov ben Eliyahu Levanon. He wasn't buried because the last soldiers who died in 48 inside the city walls was just left there, and the Jordanian never allowed. They allowed us to pick soldiers from other battle sites inside the Jordanian border, but they never allowed us to come into the Jewish quarter and gather those soldiers. So they were just lying there, not in Kever Israel. They were not properly buried for 19 years. So think about Eliyahu Levanon working on Mount Zion, in the Chamber of Holocaust, on the Tomb of King David. Above his head, there's this sign for 19 years for all the soldiers, including his son, telling that story. So I think between that memorial site and this memorial site he's in charge of is a very, I think, unique story. Most people are not aware that the role of those people who lost their children during the War of Independence, but took part in the idea of remembering the Holocaust. Here you can see the courtyard around the Chamber of Holocaust. The Chamber of Holocaust is full of signs there's not enough room, so they put them all around. Each community designed, they're most of them the same size, but each community was free to design their own plaque, who they want to remember, how they want to remember them. As I mentioned before, the Ushvenchim community next to Auschwitz. And there are all kinds of different communities. Here you can see a letter from the State Archives of partisan group who see themselves as a community, and they're approaching the Chamber of Holocaust saying, we are a group of partisans who fought in the forest of Poland, and we want to put our own sign, our own memorial site inside the Chamber of Holocaust. And here you can see a site like this to remember the unknown soldiers, the partisan, and the POWs, the prisoner of wars from the Second War, from the camp Lipova 7. Now, when I first saw this sign, I thought maybe Lipova 7 was a camp of partisans fighting in the forest. But Lipova 7 in Lublin, the street between number 7 and 9 in Lipova Street in Lublin, was actually a concentration camp for POWs. When the Nazis captured POWs, partisans, Russian Jewish soldiers, or Russian or Polish or Russian soldiers anyway, but they didn't consider them protected under the Geneva Convention. Meaning that if a French or British Jewish soldiers were captured, the Nazis usually kept them alive and treated them as soldiers under the Geneva Convention. But if they caught Jewish soldiers from the Polish or Russian army, they just sent them to the camps. They were not protected. Mainly because the Polish army was defeated and the Russians never signed the Geneva Convention, so the German says, well, if they didn't sign it, we're not obligated by it, if they're fighting the Russians. And Lipova 7 was a concentration camp that many partisans and many prisoners of war were killed there, many of them were Jews. But what's interesting in this sign is that they're remembering the people who died in Lipova 7, but also remembering all the soldiers who died in the forest of Poland and Lublin in the front line between 1939 and 1945, meaning community is not just a place, and not just the people who went to that camp or came to this community. A community is people who share the same experience. All the partisans who shared the experience of fighting in the forest of Poland are a community in the idea of the people who put this, the committee who put these signs, the comrade of arms of those partisans says, we are a community, we share the same experience, so we are entitled to put our own memorial site in the Chamber of Holocaust as those people. And not just that, Shazach, Shmuel Zavin Kahana, trying to organize a calendar of events. And every event, this is the event for Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat before Purim, and how we try to remember. I'm saying again, it's not just 10th of Tevet, all year long, every Thursday, all kinds of dates, and the program for Kaf Sivan, another Memorial Day, mainly for the Hungarian Jewish community. Of course, not all the Jewish in Hungary died on Kaf Sivan, but the date of Kaf Sivan, the 20th of Sivan, is very important because this is also the Memorial Day for the survivors of the Crusaders. 900 years ago, when the Crusaders killed and massacred communities in Central Germany, they established the 20th of Sivan as the Memorial Day. And he's trying to integrate an ancient Memorial Day that people today don't even remember exist into the Holocaust. And another example of how communities relate to the story of the Chamber of Holocaust and Holocaust together, this is a complaint. It's not actually connected to the Chamber of Holocaust, but it was entered into the archive of Shazach and Chamber of Holocaust. Romanian communities complaining why they're not mentioned on Yom Kippur, on Yom on Yom Kippur, although they mentioned the Moldavian Jews and other Jews, and says, why don't remember us? People, this is 1958, 13 years after the Holocaust, they live here, the Israelis already, but in their eyes, they are still Romanian. They are still part of that community that doesn't exist. Well, some of it exists in Romania at that time, but they're not part of the Romania. They don't live in Romania anymore, but they are part of it. They are Landschaft. The people who left that community, they are still connected. And if they're not mentioned in Hechal Shlomo and Yom Kippur Tfilah, they're complaining about it. It's important for them. Now, there are a few important, I think, very interesting artifact left. I'll try to bring three of them because three artifacts have a very unique story. This guy, his last name was Gross. I'm trying to remember his first name, and he remembers he was in the camp, and he wrote from memory a siddur, a prayer book, and something very interesting. All over the prayer book, you see all kinds of words that he wrote and then deleted. He could just skip them, but he wrote the siddur. If it says Chemla Gdola in the siddur, he wrote it down, but then he marked it. He says, I have to write it down from memory because this is how we write the prayer book, but inside the camp, I can't say that. And this is another idea of the Chamber of Holocaust as a memorial for the Jewish life under the Holocaust and the life of the Jewish believer. And in Hebrew, the word is emunah, which could be translated into believe in God, but also could be translated into trust in God, emun in God. And I think that what this prayer book represents is that the person who writes this believe in God. He's praying to God, but God exists. But he can't really trust God right now in the camp. He can't love God at the moment. So he will write those words down, but then he will cross them over and skip them in the tefillah. Another object bringing us into the idea of legends, trying to remember things through the legends, like we remember the first and the second temple, not through facts and stories about the Babylonian army or the Roman army. No, when we remember the Holocaust today in high schools especially, we talk about the German army and the Blitzkrieg and the Einsatzgruppe and all kinds of details of how the German machine massacred us. But when we remember the second temple, the destruction of the second temple and how the Roman destroyed Jerusalem, usually we don't talk about the Roman army or the Roman weapons or the Roman legion. Well, I do because I deal with those stuff, but most people who go to Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av, we don't tell the story of the Roman army. We tell legends of what happened. And Shazach was trying this in this siddur. It's called the siddur of Berele. As you can see there are only the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and the story is about the Berele. Obviously, it's an artifact put there by Shazach, but he tells the story of a child who were brought into the convent. It was hidden among the monks in Poland, and he didn't know how to pray. He was too young to know how to pray, but the only thing he remembered is the Jewish alphabet. And he wrote down the Jewish alphabet because he remembered the Besht legend. And you can see this legend is built on top of another legend. And he was writing down, according to Shazach. Shazach used to call himself Shmuel Zavin Kahana. I told you before he was the general director of the Ministry of the Religion. But his title, he wrote at least 14 notebooks of experience and ideas and meetings he had with people in the Chamber of Holocaust. And in all those notebooks, in all his stories, he used to relate himself as HaMemuneh al Har Tzion, which I think should be translated to the guardian of Mount Zion. Meaning he's not a civil servant, he's not a general director in the government, he's the guardian of, his real purpose in life is to be the guardian of Mount Zion and to be the person who meet all those people who came from the Holocaust, observing their stories and bringing them out again as legends. And he tells the story of that Berele who went to that convent and he only had this siddur of the Jewish alphabet, and he made this siddur into like a paper ball and threw it in the air every time he wanted to pair up. And obviously this object has nothing to do with the story of something doing like something to the siddur, but I don't think a young boy who can't remember the siddur can write the alphabet so neatly. But again, this is the idea of a legend. The facts don't come into the legend, but the legend is still beautiful, that a Jewish boy who doesn't know how to pray knows the alphabet and connected to the idea of praying just by writing the alphabet and looking at the alphabet. And that's, according to the legend, is what keeping them Jewish throughout his experience. And that's how he managed to leave the convent and join back to the Jewish people. Another legend, which probably is more true because, first of all, what we see here is a coat or a robe made out of scrolls, or Torah scrolls. The story is about a tailor in Buchenwald, or before that, the legend starts with two German soldiers in Buchenwald who are complaining that they don't see their girls anymore. They don't have time. The girls are complaining. One soldier tells the other, the girls are complaining, we don't take them to dances anymore. We don't dance with them anymore, and maybe they'll leave us. And then their officer is coming and says, what are you talking about? Says, the girls, we don't dance, we don't give enough time, And during the Holocaust, when they killed Jews in the camp, and he says, you know what, that's a great idea, let's organize a dance. And the officer says, you know what, before we organize the dance, you know that tailor who was here in Buchenwald? Bring me the tailor. And he brings the tailor, says the tailor, and the officer tells the tailor, you see this scroll, the Torah scroll? I want you to make a coat for me. But when you take the measurement, when you take my measurement, of course, don't touch me with your Jewish filthy hands. And the tailor had to look and try to move his hands and trying to understand the measurement of the German officer without touching him, of course. And he's taking the Torah scroll, he doesn't know what to do. I mean, there's something you can't do. I mean, if he doesn't apply to the German soldier, he would die, and you have to live. It's a sacred duty to survive the Holocaust. But to do something like this is terrible. You can't do it. And then he looked at the parashot of Ki Tavo and Bechukotai. And those two parashot, Ki Tavo and Bechukotai, with all the main swear, the curses that the Torah brings on the holiness, and these are the two main parashot that bring curses on people. It says, and he realized that those exactly two parashot are the exact scrolls he needs to make this coat. And he made those coats. So, and that's the story of the legend anyway. What I take from this, and obviously something happened here because no one in his right mind, no Jews in their right mind will do something like this to the scrolls. So the basic of the legend has to be true. And maybe it is true, saying that someone was forced to do that. But the moral story that I take from this story is the story of freedom, because the Nazi officer is part of the Nazi machine. He's part of the system that tells him what to do. The Jew the Jewish person in the katzet, in the camp, who is first to do that, who can be killed at any moment, who is forced to do the most horrible thing of desecrating the Torah scroll, he still has the freedom to make his revenge or make his internal joke on the Nazi soldier who doesn't know how to read Hebrew and doesn't know that what he's actually wearing are the worst curses of the Torah. And something more about the Chamber of Holocaust, it's not just about who died in the Holocaust. This memorial is for the Yemenite from Aden. The Germans never came to Aden. And the date here is Kafbet Bekislev, Tafshin Chet. It's 1948. Well, it's actually 1947. So it's after the Holocaust. What is doing there? Basically, in one answer, they came to the Chamber of Holocaust. They died. I call it the point of view of the Kaddish. It's not. You can look at the Holocaust from the point of view of Mein Kampf. Who were the Germans? Who were the Nazis? Is the people who were, is the pogrom, is the massacre of Jews connected to Mein Kampf, connected to the Nazis? And you can look at it from the point of view of the Kaddish, from the day of the Kaddish is Asar Tevet. The point of view of the Kaddish says, you're a community, you suffered, it happened in the 40s. You feel connected to the Chamber of Holocaust. You want to say Kaddish here on your Memorial Day, on Kafbet, you have your own Memorial Day. You can be part of this story. You don't have to be part of the historical factual story of the Holocaust. And this brings us to the main thing. 2 years ago, Makol Rishon, the newspaper Makol Rishon, was trying to build a series of articles about big debates in the Israeli society, especially big debates from the 50s. And the first big debate in their eyes was the big argument between Yad Vashem and the Chamber of Holocaust. Yad Vashem, Chamber of Holocaust was established in 1949. Yad Vashem was first built in 1953, but they started building in 1953, but they started organizing long before that. And I'll just skip it for a minute. At the beginning, in the 50s and the 60s, the money that came from the government to or from other sources to the Chamber of Holocaust actually went through Yad Vashem, and Yad Vashem gave some of his money to the Chamber of Holocaust. And there are a lot of correspondence in the 50s and the 60s. In the 50s, Shazach is sure that the money to the Chamber of Holocaust should come through Yad Vashem, because Yad Vashem is the main authority for the remembrance of the Holocaust, and the Chamber of Holocaust is just another memorial site, in that, not just a very important religious memorial site, but it could be connected to Yad Vashem. And in the 60s, Yad Vashem, as far as I understand from the archives, decided to cut itself from the Chamber of Holocaust. And from the letters, you can see that the people from the Chamber of Holocaust, Shazach and Rabbi Varaftig, who was the minister at the time, Kahana's boss actually, they were shocked and even hurt by the decision of the Yad Vashem. And the letters from Yad Vashem are very, formal, saying, we don't know what you're complaining about. I mean, it's just a financial decision. It's nothing more than that. But the soap represents something else. The idea of the soap, and there are several sites in Israel that people buried soap from the war. The idea is that people believed, Holocaust survivors believed, that this soap was made from human fat. And we know that Germans treated us like that. But we also know that the word soaps, the word sabonim, was used by the people who lived here already before the Holocaust to describe the Holocaust survivors. You're a sabon. You're not a fully grown person. You're something missing about you. Now, from the perspective of Yad Vashem, and I think it's a very important perspective. That's the idea. I mean, when Makor Shon did this article, I believe they were trying to like those people fighting between themselves. Like, let's see what happens when they fight each other. And I don't see it like that. I think that Yad Vashem has a point. In a museum, there's no way we can put this soap in the Holocaust museum, because as far as we know, this story is not true. It's a legend. It's not even a legend. It's what people believed had happened. And they brought this up. This soap was made in World War II. People believed it was made by human flesh, but as far as we know, it's not true. And in a Holocaust museum, it's unthinkable. You can't put it in a Holocaust museum. But in a memorial site, in the Chamber of Holocaust, they're trying to tell the story of the people who came here in the 50s. Not the story of what happened in the Holocaust. The story of how those people in the 50s relate to what happened to them. Now that's something else. And Rebbe Goldstein, the Rosh Yeshiva, who is keeping the Chamber of Holocaust today, is saying, we don't have the right to tell the people who came before us, the hurtful people who came from the Holocaust and brought those soaps in there. We don't have the right today to tell them, it's not true. We can forget about it. They put it there. They believed. They felt that this is what they're supposed to do. They put it there. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to remember them. We can also tell the story of how we related it historically. Is it true or is it not historically? And from Yad Vashem perspective, it's a very important perspective. We can't say from a historical point of view that this happened. What we can say from a historical point of view is that how people felt. And that's a very important part of Yad Vashem, of the Chamber of Holocaust. The point of view of how people related that. And two other tombstones, one for Fleshtin, and you can see Ukraine murdered by Petlura in 1919, and by the Nazis during the occupation, meaning that the people, after the war in 1919 in Ukraine, 100,000 people, 100,000 Jewish people were killed by the people who were trying to fight the communists. Petlura was trying to fight the communists, but on the way he killed a lot of people, at least 100,000 people. Without the Holocaust, maybe today we'll still be remembering the people killed by Petlura. The only reason I think we don't remember it today is the 100,000 is not enough comparing to 6 million. But here, those people saying, this is the same story. They were killed in Fleshtin in 1919, they were killed in Fleshtin in 1942. It is the same story. By the way, Petlura was killed by one of the survivors in the 20s, in 1926 in France, and the person who killed Petlura in 1926 was exonerated by the French. It happened in France, was exonerated by the French court because they believe he had the right to kill him. So that's another idea. And the headstone next to it is for the people from the area of Svencian, the people who died in the ghettos, and the partisans who fought in those camps. One of those fighters was Brigadier Tataluf Tolka Yitzhak Arad, who died a few months ago. And he was one of the partisans. I brought this just because he died a few months ago, and he was a very neat story. He fought along the partisan. He came here, he joined the Israeli army, he became a brigadier, he fought in the army, and his last role as a general in the army was to be in charge of the educational court, to be in charge of the soldiers who are trying to bring culture and history and memory and legacy to the Jewish soldiers. And after he left the army, the main role in his life was to write and to lecture about the Holocaust and about the Jewish fighter. And he helped to establish the new museum that is now being opening in Latrun for the Jewish soldier, the Jewish fighter in World War II all around the globe. And towards the end, the Chamber of Holocaust, you can see here the calendar of the Chamber of Holocaust. This is a report made by Shazach in the 50s, saying that what are the memorial days. Beside each individual community has their own memorial day. You have Erev Pesach for Merd Ghetto Varsha, for the rebellion of Ghetto Varsha, between the Erev Pesach to Kaf Zayin Nisan, the state memorial day. You have Kaf Sivan for the Jews of Hungary, but also in some way to remember the Crusaders. Vayikra for remember the children, and the 10th of Tevet, Yom HaKadish Klali, and all those other communities, Azkarot. And the main objects that he put in, or he maintaining in the Chamber of Holocaust, we went through some of them, the Berale Sidur and other stuff, and look at these words. The object that Hunzichu here, the object we put here for memory, realist and legendary. The real perspective and the legendary perspective, both are important in the memory of the Holocaust. And something, by the way, he wrote in here, the relation with Yad Vashem are still fine. It was there in the 50s. So the relation between Chamber of Holocaust and Yad Vashem are very important. And just a picture I took at the last, on Kaf Zayin Nisan, the last Memorial Day for the Holocaust, a picture I took here every year on Kaf Zayin Nisan on the Holocaust Day, not just on the 10th of Tevet. The Chamber of Holocaust also remember the national secular set, maybe secular, maybe not, Memorial Day, and they bring, so every year soldiers come here to have their to organize the ceremony. And what's unique in the Chamber of Holocaust is to see the flags here and the soldiers and people from the Haredi community all gathering together. We started with the idea of Hakel, people gathering together. And you can see in the picture the Rosh Yeshiva of the diaspora yeshiva talking. And I think that this mixture of people coming together, people who maybe not meet in other events, I think maybe that's reason enough, or an opening for reason for why the Chamber of Holocaust is important today. And that's the last picture. I'm hoping if there are questions. If not,
a few. Hi, Gavri.
Hi.
First of all, thank you very much. I don't know if people know, but this is a unique place, and there aren't many people who have the knowledge about the history and the artifacts in this place. So thank you very much, Gavri, for bringing this to us. And
actually,
the audience, I think, is. What, sorry?
I was saying that a lot of people who helped me organize this, like a few professors, Professor Doron Bar, Dr. Zohar Maor, and Professor Israel Rosenson, who taught me a lot about the Chamber of Holocaust. So there are a few historians who are very expert about the Chamber of Holocaust. I'm just trying to bring their findings into the public. That's what they also wrote books about the subject. So